go.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We've got Jamie Locke from our Utah office of Tutor Doctor here, and I'm Chris Lien with the San Diego County office of Tutor Doctor. And we're going to be addressing today more of a focused approach toward college admissions timeline. It's that time of the year. We're in mid-July, and we're getting a lot of calls now from people that are asking, gee, am I behind? Am I too early? What am I? And I said, well, first of all, you're fine. Let's talk through your scenario and see where things are at. And then that sort of calming effect opens up the discussion. And then next thing you know, the parents realize that there are multiple paths. And there's no one right path. And so we're here today to sort of have a general discussion, general timings. These don't apply to every student. But the vast majority, and as always, you can feel free to contact your local Tutor Doctor office for your specific customized recommendations. Any questions you want to bounce off any of us, you'll find our contact information in the area down below and in the About section. But as for now, I'm going to turn it over to Jamie, and he's going to open up the discussion on some general considerations and factors when it comes to timing of testing, and really starting from the 9th grade all the way up.
Yeah, Chris, absolutely. Thank you for the wonderful, warm introduction. Yeah, I think you're right. I think one of the major things is everything's okay. Take a breath, right? You know, I got a call yesterday, as a matter of fact, which was a parent that was absolutely panicked. And then you start to talk to them and you say, wait a minute, no, everything is going to be okay. And, you know, all it is this is an exercise in planning now, you know, this entire college applications experience and what classes do I take when should I study for the ACT or the SAT, you know, should I take the PSAT? All of those questions just come down to planning, really. So I think what I'd like to do is maybe share just it's a handout that we actually give to parents that gives that broad timeline. So let me go ahead and share my screen, and then we'll kind of use this as the basis of our discussion today, if that's okay.
Yeah, Jamie, that sounds good. And by the way, whatever we're showing, whether you're seeing this live, you're seeing it recorded, you're seeing it 2 years after it's posted, contact your local office. We have many of these types of materials that we can share with you, send to you, talk through. This is not the only time you'll see this. So.
Yeah, so I think we start off with AP, actually, is the way that we start off here. So AP is always a question in a lot of parents' minds. Most schools will allow you to start taking AP courses your freshman year. What are your thoughts about this? You know, should you take an AP class and not take the AP test? Chris, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, very good question. So 3 questions in one. Number one, 9th grade. There are a lot of parents who feel, oh my gosh, my kid needs to be an AP, you know, and if they had it back in the 7th grade, they'd be trying it. The AP classes originally were designed for what they are, advanced placement, meaning they're sort of a replacement for a college class if everything goes to plan. So most students really do well if they're in the junior and senior years taking them. Now, these days, many sophomores will take AP classes. 1 or 2, they're sort of getting their sea legs beneath them in a sense. But then when you're looking at 9th graders, you know, a lot of 9th graders don't really have the experience. They don't have the depth of knowledge, and they really don't have a lot of the executive functioning skills that you also need to have. It's not just all about content and how smart your kid is, how hard they work. Those are all wonderful things, but it's really a whole portfolio, if you will, that comes together. And most kids don't really get there until toward the end of their 10th grade. But every situation is different. Every child is different. So we do put it here as grade 9 because there are some that wish to proceed in that. And by the way, if there's an honors level of a class, sometimes that's a good happy medium between the standard college prep and the AP version to take that honors, because it's advanced rigor, but it's not as much as the AP. Now, your other question was about the exam. That's really up to the student. We've seen it go both ways. We've had students that didn't take an AP class, but they took the AP exam and got a 5 on it after having some tutoring. Remarkable. And we've seen other kids that they can't apply themselves. They're a little bit in over their head on the AP exam, and then they realize they're not going to take it because they really were getting like a B or B minus in the AP class. and taking the exam might not be a fruitful time for them. So every case is special. Every case is unique, but in general, if you are going to take the AP exam or the class, take the exam so you can get that college placement benefit from it.
Yeah, absolutely. So that kind of covers 9 through 12, right? Always be thinking about your AP classes as applicable, based upon your situation. And then the next kind of major stopping point is after sophomore year, where you start to actually get into the flow here and you start to have, real planning activities and real work that needs to start to happen. So for, right after you finish your sophomore year, and the reason that's important is usually related to the math. Most of the time by the end of your sophomore year, your student is going to have all the math that they're going to need. And it's anywhere from 7th and 8th grade math all the way up to the end of sophomore year is kind of where the ACT or the SAT will test your students' math skills. So once you're there, that's when you start being able to do some of the work, some of the studying, some of the test prep, working with tutors if that works for you. But yeah, that's where this kind of starts to kick in is, right before you start your junior year. A great way to get going and also to find out which test is better for you is to take some practice tests. You can talk to your local tutor doctor office about doing that. And, we make it really easy. It's about a 3 to 3.5 hour time investment on your student's part. And then what we do is we take that test, we score it, and then we give you a very extensive set of study guidelines. Here are the concepts that you did really well on. Here are the concepts where you need additional work, and we'll help you work through part of this plan. When you take a practice test, you'll always get a free consultation with a college expert with us too, which is amazing. Even if you intend to DIY and study yourself, take that time, take as many practice tests as you can. And that's going to start kind of right after your sophomore year when you've got all the necessary math and English and all the other subjects that you need to actually be successful on the test. So next up, winter.
Well, Jamie, can I just inject one quick thing?
Absolutely.
You brought a great point up, and from the timing, which is why this timeline exists, it is really a very good idea in the summer prior to the 11th grade to take an official ACT or SAT practice test. And for going back to the students that are entering the 9th grade or entering 10th grade, there are versions of the PSAT and versions of a pre-ACT that a student can take. The benefit of that, in fact, we've had a lot of students contact us through time, or a lot of parents contact us because they want sort of an independent third-party diagnostic of how their child is tracking in terms of college readiness and, face it, on the international stage. And some of these parents, they want more than what the school has provided in terms of their testing and such. So when they have a student with a 4.4 GPA and they come in and they take a practice test that shows a little bit lower scoring, that can be for several different factors. But more importantly, where are they strong? Are they strong on geometry but weak on trigonometry? Are they strong on sentence completion but weak on inference questions? And you can use that information taken by practice test to prepare in advance of the new school year, and knowing there are relative strengths and weaknesses the student has, those can continue to be worked on before test prep occurs. We sometimes call that pre-prep. But it really is a good idea for the students to start to get serious about test preparation in that summer before grade 11, which is why it hit our timeline, because having a quality test preparation program is like having another honors level class itself. So if that can precede the 11th grade, then it gets it out of that already very busy junior year. And that every student, every parent who's ever done that before said, wow, we're so glad we did that, because otherwise our junior year would have been an absolute mess. You still take the test during the junior year, but if you can get that done in the summer preceding, or at least a chunk of it, and there's still time now to get good chunk of that program done before the school year, then you're in much better footing going into the new school year.
Yeah, and much less stress on your student also, right? Yeah. Okay, so now we're at winter. So, junior year is quite often the hardest academically for students, and sports and all of those things don't stop, needless to say. So at some point they're going to need to take their first ACT or SAT. What are your thoughts around timing? And is there a perfect time, or is this kind of like everything else? Your mileage may vary depending upon your student and where they're at.
Well, there is no perfect time. Disclaimer number one again. But
once again, breathe, right? Everybody breathe.
Right. So there is no perfect time, but there is the other side of the coin. There is a less imperfect time to do it, which is start now versus later. Time, as Jamie just said, time is really not on your side when you're in these years. Now, there are seasons. There are seasons when for instance, a student athlete might have a sport that's very heavy in the fall. Well, then maybe they don't do the test prep in the fall. I mean, they could do their test prep in the summer and take the exams in the fall, because once you're done with your program, taking the exams, there's just a little bit of a brush up before each of the exams. But really, the right way to look at it is, when do you need to have scores available? And if you look ahead to the senior year, and if you're part of the early decision or early action grouping of students, then you typically do need to have your scores available on or before November 1 in many cases, so that you can submit the scores along with the rest of your package. And then many schools do allow you to electronically submit additional scores after that date, usually up until December, January. But and since most students take an exam these days 2 or even 3 times, you have to work backward in time to figure out when should you start. So it's sort of a left to right and right to left schedule planning. That's why there is no perfect time. It really comes down to the student's academic schedule, extracurricular schedule, and other factors going on in the student's life.
Yeah, but I'm also a big fan of getting a good score on the books as early on as you can to help a student, lower that stress level, all those different things. And there are lots of options to take these tests. They're almost every single month. It comes down to, like you said, Chris, sports. When is this going to be, when is this going to be a crazy season for me? And that's another area actually where having scores earlier, if your student is potentially a scholarship, sports scholarship type person, then that's also a good time to get those scores in early. Quite often, the coach at the college of your students, choice is going to be looking for those scores a little bit earlier if you have a student athlete.
Oh yeah, and with super scoring still being in vogue, and for people who don't know what super scoring is, when you take exams, say you take 3 different administrations of the ACT. Well, if you did the best on the reading section on test number 1, best on the math on test number 2, and best on science in test number 3, then schools that permit super scoring allow you to sort of cherry pick and create a fictitious super scored exam score result that has the best of each of those individual sections. So that's another reason why many students do attempt the official exams, up to 3 times these days, for that super scored result for admissions and also for merit scholarships. So again, much of it comes down to timing, and really just making sure you have a plan, as Jamie said early on. The plan is critical.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the plan is critical. This comes down to having a plan. And it's also, in that summer, doing some serious discussion about what colleges am I interested in, as a student. Make sure that you know that, because, Chris, you just got into, different timelines associated with admissions and things like that too. Those could vary depending upon the colleges that your student is trying to gain entry into. So once again, the earlier that you start this process and you're kind of going through it, and it is a process, a journey really more than anything. But the earlier you get started with that, start having discussions with your students, the easier and less stress, your student's going to be under throughout this process, and you as a parent too. So I've done this 3 times with my kids, and it can be very, very stressful, especially if you've got a student that's not a planner, a student that maybe needs some work on those executive functioning skills. All of those things can bear, upon the level of stress that you're going to have. So,
yeah, okay. Absolutely. And one additional twist or wrinkle, In my office here in San Diego, we've had a lot of student athletes through the year. In fact, it's kind of our niche, if you will. We had one female elite soccer player. She went on to play Division 1, and it was interesting because we had tutored her, done subject tutoring, and then the parents called us in the summer preceding the sophomore year in a panic, saying we need to get ACT going now. And so we didn't know the background. We knew, she played soccer and all that, but we didn't understand what was going on until we said, hey, we've got to meet, let's sit down. And figured if we met in person, it would calm everybody down. So we did. And then they told us what was going on. I was like, oh, scholarship sounds. And so what was happening is they were being pressured very heavily by the D1 schools that were recruiting her for the soccer team and such, that they needed test scores in advance. She had reasonably strong grades, but they needed that test score, and that was the only gating item between whether she could go or not. So we don't do crash courses, but we did an accelerated course of it. And it was a bit of a struggle for her because, Jamie, as you said earlier on, she hadn't been exposed. This was the very beginning of her 10th grade. And this is right as Common Core math started to be phased in. So everything was a mishmash. And so it was really difficult, but we really supplemented her test prep program along with the tutor's know-how of the subject skill, and could really assess week in, week out what her relative strengths and weaknesses were versus the outcomes that were needed. She ended up with a fabulous increase of her ACT score, ended up with the scholarship, being able to go on to the college and everything else. But that was a very difficult scenario, very stressful for that family, as you mentioned, Jamie. But the outcome was good when you have the right plan put in place and understand really what the drivers are behind the context.
Yeah, and the right help. Yeah, those coaches want to make sure that they're going to be recruiting players that are going to be academically eligible in a year or two, when it's time for them to start playing. So yeah, that changes your deadlines. But okay, so we are through. Now we're in spring. So, and with spring comes AP exams, right? Every May for the most part, depending on the AP class that you're taking. Another very stressful time, right? Because you're going to want to get those scores that are going to translate into actual college credit. So that's usually kind of where we're looking at in the spring. And then that kind of rolls right on into the summer. And if you've got a student, it's coming time to start thinking about applying here in the fall after your junior year. It's time to start applying. Any thoughts on how to spend that summer? And once again, your mileage may vary, Chris.
Your miles definitely will vary. Hope you have a good tailwind behind you. That's the key, not headwinds. But yes, on schedule, and let's go back just a little bit into that schedule. Notice what's happening there in May, right? So going back to your earlier question, Jamie, when should we start? And one of my sort of pseudo answers to it was, well, there's no perfect time, but there is an imperfect time to you don't want to have your SAT exams clustered at the same time as your AP exam.
On top of your AP, absolutely.
Yeah, we years ago, I'm reminded of something from about 4 or 5 years ago when we were joking one day about the parallel. My oldest was going through that exact scenario, and we said, well, when the flowers do bloom, the students feel doom, right? And it's the AP exams along with the SAT. And in fact, so two things I'll state. So that's why I always like to say sort of a top-down, bottom-up, or left to right scheduling perspective. You want to see what the whole timeline requires, so you're not just looking this direction, you're looking back the other way, saying, oh yes, okay, so if we work back in time, yep, this is the right time to start. And that's how you want to address it. The key is this: you want to start with enough time that you can get 3 sessions. So for rising seniors, if you've been told that the SAT and ACT don't matter anymore, ding dong, the wicked witch is dead, as they said, and you find out, oh my gosh, I need to have it. There's still time for you. It's just, do understand, you will have a timeout at some point, after which you can no longer submit your scores to the university. In most cases, it's the December exam. So research that, and there still is time to get there from here. Juniors, you can prevent being in that scenario by making sure you start as early as possible in your junior year, or the summer preceding it, since there is still time. And when you get out to the AP time, that's one of the reasons why people sort of decide ACT versus SAT. Do they want to take a May SAT That is the weekend preceding the start of the AP exams. In some cases, it's okay because they've completed their SAT prep well in advance. In other cases, they like the ACT because it typically occurs a couple of weeks before AP exams, and then the next AP isn't until the middle of July or June. So yeah, so that's another reason why you want to consult with your local tutor doctor office to see not only which exam type or format is best, but scheduling and timing of it best fits your life.
Agreed. Yeah. Use us. We're good resources to help you lay things out on paper so you can see it both forwards and backwards and up and down also, for your students' particular, unique needs. So, and now we have rolled through. So yeah, so I guess the tip was don't take ACTs, SATs, and APs on the same weekend. If that scheduling even works out. But now you're in the summer and your students starting to get senioritis, right? Starting to see some of that, light at the end of the tunnel here. What should they be working on, Chris, for summer and kind of into the fall?
Very good question. It's almost like the old TV commercial, but wait, there's more. And this is true. This is a very important time right now. We, through the years, have received calls, typically in the third, fourth week of August, from a parent who doesn't sound all that pleased. And the parent says, I was just informed, and then I could probably finish the sentence for you. I was just informed that my son or my daughter had summer homework, conveniently seemed to bury it, and it came out now 3 days before the start of the school year. And we've got what appears to be a month's worth of work to get completed. Or
now my student's a month behind, right?
Yeah.
And going into a very difficult class even. Yeah.
Yeah. So as we record this, in the middle of July, anybody who sees it now or even well into August, there is still time to get caught up with all of that. And get the AP stuff going. But I also recommend for anybody who doesn't have assigned homework, but they do have rigorous honors and AP classes, it's a very good idea to do what we call a running start to the school year. The first, 2 or 3 weeks before the school year starts, have maybe a couple of sessions a week. So your student doesn't go from 0 to 5 days a week of having to do schoolwork and shock to the system. This way, if math is the perennial weakness, see if you can get access to that material and do a review preview blend. And so we found that that's a great way to get moving. And in fact, that's another reason why test prep in the summer is such a good thing, because it clears out the cobwebs, and it really does help review prior fundamentals and previews what they're going to be doing in the next year. So there's another reason you want to be doing that. And then lastly, really the biggest thing is, again, recapping, take an SAT or ACT practice test. There is no cost for it. We can send that stuff out to you, it's part community service and it's part serving our customer base. We've done that for the 20 plus years the company's been in existence. So that's why we want to do these messages, to help people know there are answers out there. A lot of changes are going on in the academic space. And we're here to help you, as Jamie said. We want to help you so that you can thrive and look at this timeline as a very effective map and not a cruel taskmaster in the end. And because we can help you get there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that's all the time we've got, Chris. So it has been engrossing and always fun. So it's great to see you again. And yeah, look forward. Please keep checking our channel, Admitted, and we will continue posting content that hopefully is useful. Also in the comments section from the videos, if you think of additional questions, things that you would like us to tackle for you, please go ahead, put those in there, and we will put together something and answer any questions that you've got. So thank you once again, and it's been a pleasure. Have a great evening, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.